Okay, our beloveds, today is another day, and our another is doing her best to manifest through a higher vibration. She has had many challenges this last week and is questioning much of what we give her because of these challenges, and it is merely another test for her, and she knows it at some point, but has considerable moments of frustration. And why do we share this? Just to let you know that it is not linear, and it is not logical at times, and the words of encouragement that we give her, or the explanation, doesn't align with what science says. And yet, when she follows what we recommend, she is finding that it helps, even though the science would give a different answer. Now, why do we share that information? Because we wish to inform you. It is not that this is not what the science actually says. It's actually because the science that you guys are currently working with is not fully formed and therefore has not dug deep on many issues yet. And yet you speak so firmly as if you know absolute truth when you are merely in kindergarten exploring how crayons work and attempting to convince others that this reality is really real. This is not to say that science is not real. Science is incredibly real. But believe it or not, there's much of your science that is not fully formed yet. And it's not that you aren't curious enough in some ways, because you are. But the biggest problem is that you become very entrenched in plausibility and deniability and thinking that you know everything that there is to know. And you stop digging deeper with curiosity. It's similar to cooking your favorite meal. Once you have perfected the recipe, you don't try to perfect it anymore, and you don't explore with curiosity. And so this is where you stay. And we are trying to encourage our another to not say yay or nay on what we tell her, but instead to be willing to explore with us for maybe a week to see if maybe not just a little of what we say, but a lot of what we say is truth. Now, she will never convince anybody else of this, and that is fine. But she is willing to at least give us sufficient time to address this underlying contrast or conflict in which he has heard others claim to be truth and what we claim to be truth. And we're not the only ones. There are a few on the internet who see it much as we do and have explained the energetics behind it. But nonetheless, she is questioning what we tell her. So now why do we share this with you all? Because anybody who is connected to spirit and receives a message that is in conflict with what a decent majority of you believe, it is prudent to say, I'm not just going to blindly follow, because that is the sign of an immature person. Anybody who reads anything on the internet, whether it's science-based or not, and blindly follows without any curiosity to validate it themselves, will oftentimes attract more experiences from the universe to teach them to think for themselves. And we're not going to tell you all the ways within which this could occur because there are just too many. But just trust us when you take any position and are not willing to listen to other people and see it or hear it from a different perspective. Chew on it for a bit. Process how their information fits in with your information, and then come to another well-seasoned conclusion. If you cannot do that, your rigidity creates as much of a problem for you as it does for the universe, because you are the microcosm of the microcosm, which simply means that you are a singular point representing your singular point. And if you cannot expand your ability to interact with the world more fully, you are simply not allowing yourself to expand, and you are not restricting the growth of the universe, because no matter what you do create new data points in what we would call the universal data bank, or what others call the Akashic records. So it's not that, but you are not expanding towards cohesion. Now, let us give a different example. Let's go back to the caveman days. If you had never had sufficient people within your tribe to be curious and to explore more of what could be, you would never have come up with fire or the wheel or ways of farming the land or domesticating animals. You would have continued to live that way. So this is the one thing that we wish to tell you, and we're going to give you a very specific example. Z-Dog, who many of you rely upon as your truth, he is not a god. He is merely a human being who is as entrenched in a particular philosophy as that other gentleman who spoke about his perspective on the vaccines. And if you believe either of them, without going within or learning the underlying science of what each of them refers back to, you are still blindly following. Our another is not going to go into the science because she knows what is right for her, and she has no desire to educate people on what they should do with their own bodies, vaccinate or not. So she is not going to go in and educate herself more. But for those of you who do have a dog in this fight, not so much for other people, but that you're so firmly entrenched in the vaccine is the right thing or it's not, we encourage you to do your own crash course study so that you yourself understand the science and the technology behind what any of these people say. It is not cut and dry. Once people are entrenched in their mindset, everything will be pulled through that filter. And we can tell you that both of these individuals have a flawed understanding, but each so firmly believe in what they're saying. Neither of them are trying to lead you down a path to a destruction, but both see it through their particular scientific interpretation. And we know that if you go out and do your own research, it's not that you will understand the specifics behind it, but you will begin to recognize the complexity of this. And we will tell you this, that both of them have a valid point of concern, and that there are risks. When you are dealing with a pandemic versus a traditional rollout, there are different concerns. And the reality is that nobody knows how this is going to play out, because this particular COVID series of strains is also here to teach the collective a spiritual lesson. So you cannot simply use the science behind it, because it is an unknown variable. And for anyone, and we stress this, for anyone to tell you that with an unknown variable that they know how to predict how it's going to play out is inaccurate. If you look at any individual who has cancer, they will tell you percentages based on prior cancer patients, on the likelihood of the success of their treatment. But this is based on other people having had exactly that form of cancer. Now, the science-minded of you out there are going to bash this, and that is fine, because you again see it through your paradigm, and we have no desire to convince you of anything else. You will either be curious and go out and do your own research. You will be open to the idea that you might be wrong, or you won't. But for those of you who want to understand this better, go do your own research and realize that things are not within your control. The science is not fully formed yet, but as you have more people be curious with neutrality, going back to our message on the double slit experiment, as you become more curious, you will dig in deeper. And it is not the time to do it during the pandemic, because everyone who is doing the research on this right now is in a natural state of chaos and stress. And you don't think clearly. You think from a fear-based perspective, and rightfully so. But once this has passed, and the studies can be done to find better explanations of what went right and what didn't, you will begin to see how what you were told is not accurate, not even nearly accurate. Those who said that the vaccines would be 100% effective are wrong, because the variants that are coming about now are rendering those vaccines ineffective. And there will be many, many more variants coming about, because that is the natural proclivity of this particular pandemic. It is here to teach you all that you can no longer control your environment around you, and to teach you to surrender. And yet the more you hold on to a knowing that you are right, the more the variants will show up to teach you that you're wrong. It is the spiritual nature of this pandemic versus the scientific nature. It is going to jump the gap of your reasoning. to teach you humility. Your people, your species has much to learn, and you are brilliant if you only allow yourself to do so. Research more, conclude less, and be curious. And for those of you who have received the vaccine, who have any level of fear, we just simply that again, you go back with your intentions and say, I harmonize with the vaccine that is within my body, and that I trust that this vaccine will do any and all things that it can to keep me safe now and in the future. Do not allow fear to come into your body, because fear is what creates a resonance with disharmony, and trust allows this frequency of surrender in a form to work for your highest good, whatever that may be. So this is our PSA for today for those who are interested, and for those who are not, it is okay. We don't have to all agree. That is the beauty of you all incarnating on this planet. Planet stupid, as Tom Thurber would call it. It is your journey of self-exploration, and there is no singular path. And as each of you goes on your unique path, you continue to expand the universe for a greater database. And we will say this, once you all come onto the spiritual path and grow in unison there, the downside is that the universal Google database will begin to shrink, because you will all be moving towards unconditional love in a similar fashion, and the data points filling out the rest of the circle will no longer be as numerous, if at all. And so it is. Namaste.